Hi, this is Dan Harris, and welcome to the Ironbird Podcast. On today's podcast, we have Jamie Gibson. Jamie runs the Flightess. It's a corporate flight attendant training and service. On today's episode, we talk about everything in the back of the cabin: catering, caterers, hotels, FBOs, destinations, everything that a private traveler will want to know from a flight attendant's standpoint. All right, Jamie, for our first question, why don't you kind of talk to us about what made you want to become a flight attendant?
Okay, so I am going to tell you the wrong answer of what you're not supposed to say.
Sure.
I wanted to travel the world.
That's the right answer, right? Isn't that
No,
everyone's?
that's not what you say in an interview. That is the wrong. That is the wrong
But,
answer.
oh, I want to service.
I love people.
Yeah, yeah.
Customer service makes me happy, and certainly those things are true. But at 21, you're not sophisticated enough to really think through what's the professional currency that's going to bring me vitality in my lifelong career. I just had a Pinterest board of all these places I wanted to go around the world. So I took a job making no money whatsoever, but I did get to see the world, and that kind of launched and propelled the rest of my aviation career.
What was that first job?
I worked for a government subcontractor, so I flew troops around the world from their different bases.
Wow.
And that actually ended up opening an opportunity for me to work on a VIP, kind of top secret government contract. Because I was so young, I was able to get a top secret security clearance pretty quickly.
Wow. Do you still have your top secret?
It expires this year.
Oh, no. You're going to try and get it back?
You know, there might be a situation just by virtue of where I live, working out of DC and the clients that I have, that I could get it back, but it would require another trip to the Pentagon.
Okay. For all the times that you've been flying, what's been one or some of your more memorable trips?
That is such a difficult question. And like, memorable can mean different things. It can mean memorable in terms of like, you're like, oh, that was memorable in like a not so great way.
Sure, yeah. Well, let's go into the not so great ones. Those are usually funner.
Yeah. Well, I always think of that Andre Agassi quote where he said, you know, after winning my third Grand Slam, he's like, I was privileged to know a piece of knowledge that not many people know. He's like, the wins don't feel good as nearly as the bads feel bad, and the feeling doesn't last nearly as long, not even close. You know, so you can have those flights where the clients were like, this was the best flight ever, thank you so much. And then you have those flights where something went wrong. It was maybe out of your control.
Those sit with you for so long. They still do.
And it lasts so much longer than the good.
Yeah.
So I've had all kinds of things happen to me.
Yeah.
You know, doing this for 10 years, you see a lot.
Yeah. What was one of the situations we're in that you were like, I don't know, why am I doing this? Like, I'm the worst flight attendant in the world. I should probably quit.
Probably any time I've flown Russian clients.
Really?
I think I'm a little too smiley and very and I'm aware of this too. Culturally, they see smile as a sign of weakness. And that's such an inherent part of my personality that comes out through customer service. And I don't mean it to be it's not inauthentic to me, but to perhaps culturally to them.
I think you're faking it.
Totally. Or that I'm weak. And so, you know, that was a really hard thing for me to overcome, understanding that cultural difference and being able to match and dial down that for my clients.
So have you been able to kind of straight face it a little bit better with certain clients?
Certainly.
That's interesting. What are some of the more memorable trips or people you've flown or airplanes you've flown? You're like, oh, I won't forget this trip or this airplane.
You know, there's destinations you go to where you're like, life's pretty magical. I can't believe I'm doing this for work professionally, seeing places that you never imagined, taking a camel ride around the pyramids of Giza, being in Tahiti. And granted, you're there for work and you are working. So for those purposes, it's quite memorable. But then you have the memorable trips where you get to be a part of someone's really special lifetime, something that they're doing that they just got married, they're going on their honeymoon, or
like a wedding, anniversary, or a big 60, 70 birthday, huge trip, all their friends. Yeah.
And that's really special to make that memorable and extraordinary for them. Even something as simple as parents taking their kids on a college tour.
Oh yeah,
right?
those are always kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. And to see that dynamic of, that's their baby and they're getting ready to let them out into the world in some capacity.
It's funny because some of my more stressful flights arranging have been big events and things like that. I'm like, oh man, if I screw this up, if something happens, I'm turning a great experience and great trip to a really poor one. It's super stressful. At least the flight out is always stressful. Not that I don't care about the return flight, but as long as like I get people, especially on vacations, if I can get you to your vacation, if you have to spend an extra day in Mexico or somewhere like that, I feel a little less. But getting people to their vacation or to a meeting, that first leg is always the most stressful. Once I get someone there, it's like that stress level drops and I feel a lot better. But yeah, getting people to that location. Talking about the in-flight experience, like we're here in this beautiful Global Express. How do you customize that in-flight experience? Like, what do you do? Do you do research? Do you what's your approach of how do I make this flight special?
Totally. There's a couple of things that I consider. First, the parameters of the flight, right? Flight duration, how many clients are on board to really get a good understanding of what's possible, right? Then you start to look at the destination or the departure destination because there's always some fun ideas potentially that could be just within that. And then I do something called social engineering where essentially I stalk the clients.
Great. Yeah.
I consume every piece of content I can on them through the internet, whether they have a Twitter, formerly known as X feed, if they have a public Instagram page. For example, there's a gentleman, we fly a lot of individuals that privacy is sacred for them. So there's not a lot of information on them on the internet. But I did find a hedge fund manager is really into triathlon. So his triathlon numbers and race times were public. So I was able, for the destination we were going to, print out all of the courses of running, biking,
cool.
for where we were going, so that he would kind of know like some cool things to check out. And then we tailored the menu around, certain diets that were in Triathlon magazine and things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever I've had this before where someone brought a stationary bike on the airplane to work out. Have you ever had some good seen some good workouts on an airplane?
I see a lot of yoga for certain because I think that's one thing that brings people quite a lot of zen in an environment that can be very unzen-like for clients. Yeah. But I've definitely seen the Peloton be a stationary object in the aircraft as well.
Yeah, which probably isn't, probably not legal on a Part 135 flight, but as long as you stow it away after from takeoff and landing.
Well, and the thing to consider too is that the one thing that these clients can't buy more of is time, right? Time is the one commodity they can't buy more of. So the aircraft acts as a vessel of a time machine. So they are buying their time back. Yeah. But then they look at different layers of, okay, I need to get a workout in. How can I layer this so that as I'm traveling, buying my time back, I'm getting my workout in? Yeah.
For airplane owners, when they are, bought an airplane or looking to build budgets, and they're looking at their crew costs, and they look at the flight attendant line item, what do you see as something that they should consider when they're saying, all right, do I need to hire a full-time flight attendant, or should I look more on a contract standpoint?
Totally. So I think and granted, everyone has different priority levels. And there are some individuals that are saying, well, I don't need that fancy service, right? Well, I would say look outside of the fancy service. It's not always about that. It really is about asset management, right? And having someone take care of your asset and the inventory, the interior of it, the interior management. Because at the end of the day, your pilots that you're hiring, they want to climb up the air stairs and they want to turn left. They don't want to think about anything on the right side of the aircraft. And sometimes that can feel really stressful for them because it's a little bit outside the scope of their responsibility or their normal use of duties.
Or their strengths.
First, I wasn't going to say it, but you did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to pilots that are good with passengers, but I think, when I look at the strengths, I want them focused on flying an airplane.
Not catering or what's on board or making sure the snack drawer is refilled or the Fijis have been refilled.
Or even the business standpoint. And I'll probably get some grief because there probably are some good pilots that understand the business side to it. But I know a lot of times airplane owners will build a relationship with a pilot and then let the pilot make some business-related decisions around the airplane. And I just don't think they're qualified all the time to make those business-related decisions.
Totally, because I think they look at them as their trusted advisor, right? And that's...
Probably goes to staffing maybe they're making flight attendant decisions, right?
Very much so. And you see that particularly at MBAA, right? So when you are walking the static display, you always see the aircraft owner flanked by his pilots.
Yep.
And they're kind of there as a team helping him, be their trusted advisors for, if it's looking at an aircraft purchase. And, and certainly there are pilots who have been in this business for a long time and they super, super knowledgeable,
Yep.
but it's not always the case. And I think the other component that's definitely worth talking about is just the safety factor of having another set of ears and eyes in your cabin. Because at the end of the day, your pilot should be flying the aircraft. If something smells off or something they hear a little bit, something's different, you have a whole other set of senses back here making sure that everything is safe and you're safe as well.
Well, one of the big things that in recent memory, we had a Challenger incident down in Florida.
Yes.
And they had to escape through the baggage exit, which I think if there wasn't a flight attendant on that, unfortunately for the pilots, they died in the crash. And I think I would say it was the flight attendant that saved those passengers' lives because she knew how to get exit out of the back of the baggage compartment.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great recent history example. That was actually one of my dear friends, Sydney.
Really?
Yes. So I've had many conversations with her about this, and it's certainly her story to tell, so I'll tread respectfully here. But there's no doubt that there would have been a lot more casualties and perishing lives in that.
I mean, the videos
accident.
are incredible.
And then, I have conflicting feelings because I'm kind of like, you see a burning aircraft and people are
God.
taking videos.
I know.
It's a hard context and environment, but there's no doubt that those clients wouldn't have gotten off because the boarding door was inoperable and both the overwing exit was also jammed as well.
Really?
Yes. And so, it's interesting too because it's really put a highlight on not only doing your safety emergency procedures at your annual training, but once you get back on your aircraft, do them with your principals.
Yeah.
Do them in the dark.
Yeah.
Say, I'm incapacitated. How would we exit this aircraft right now? It's really put a big light on now that we have a direct example of the role that cabin attendants or flight attendants play for safety on board. It's
wow, do it in the dark is really interesting.
because she did it in the dark. She had to open the baggage door in the dark.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
There was no
incredible.
flashlight back there either.
Yeah, I mean, there's no windows back in the baggage. I mean, wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I don't think she probably gets enough shine for that.
I think she will eventually when she's ready to tell her story and really use it for an advocacy. And I think she, that time will come. There's a lot of healing that has to come before then.
Well, I can't imagine what kind of experience that is. I mean, anytime I'm in a commercial airplane and there's a delay on the outbound and they're like, oh, there's a maintenance, it's like automatically that raises anxiety levels, right? Or anytime you're in rough turbulence, you're like, oh, I feel a little uneasy, right? But imagine knowing, you've got double engine issues and you're going to have to figure out how to get out of the airplane. It was an incredible job by the pilots to land that airplane under that circumstance. An incredible job by that flight attendant to get those passengers out of that airplane.
It was an unplanned emergency. She was sitting in the jump seat, and if she hadn't moved back to the seat that we're trained to take in order to direct the cabin and have a full vantage point of the cabin, I don't believe Sydney would be here as well if she hadn't moved.
What is that relationship like when you're, like, again, from an airplane owner standpoint, you've got, two pilots, two or three, and then you've got your flight attendant. And I've used flight attendant, but I know other people use cabin server.
Right.
And I know from a legality standpoint, sometimes people use different terms because if you don't label someone a legal crew member, then they can be on duty for longer.
Right.
So I don't know if do you have a preferred nomenclature of it?
I truly believe flight attendant is the fairest because we are there and of course we're there. If there's a safety or an emergency on board, we're going to step up. That's what we train for. We go annually for that. So I do prefer flight attendant, but I understand the legality liabilities of why they've come up with these other terms: cabin server, cabin host.
Yeah, cabin host.
And you read that in the contract as well with charter clients. The cabin server is primarily there for service.
Yeah.
So I think that will also be a bigger industry topic, primarily after Sydney, is ready to come talk about that.
Well, it comes back to duty time restrictions, right?
Right.
And if you've got someone that has flown and has gotten less than required rest, or has flown more than they've been required to, or legally can if they were, what does that do to their ability to help in a safety situation, right?
And there have been many times, I primarily fly international, right? So there are many times the pilots are swapping out, but I'm staying on.
Yeah, you're
And
doing double duty. That's
yes,
right.
Yes, and at this point, there are ways to mitigate fatigue. You very much are utilizing the crew rest, and the pilots are aware. They kind of force you. They're like, stop washing dishes. Please go lay down.
Yep.
And that's when you really have that team environment where they recognize you're going to be on this plane for almost 20 hours.
Yeah.
Take a rest, take a break,
Yeah.
sleep while the guests are sleeping if you can.
What you've probably had times where you've had really good relationships with crew members and then kind of negative ones.
Right.
How do you manage those kind of negative relationships with crew members and how would you move forward with a crew if you're a full-time employee and they're a full-time employee? Like, what are some of the strategies you would do to kind of manage that relationship?
Well, I have several things to say about this. I think that when you are considering taking a full-time job offer, one of the things you have to look at is is your chief pilot, is your director of aviation in your corner?
Yep.
Because that's going to really be a tell-all for how much you're going to enjoy your job. Do they have your back? Are they your biggest advocate in terms of the cabin attendant, flight attendant role on board? So I think it's of the utmost importance if you are considering taking a full-time position to really make sure that person is a big advocate for the flight attendant role, and of you. That being said, I've worked with all different kinds of personalities, and pilots are such a wide variety of personalities. So I've had some sour experiences, but I always try to remember. I always reiterate this phrase in my head: "It's you and me against the problem. We're on the same team.
Yeah.
We're on the same team. We just got to find commonality."
Yep.
And normally, by the end of a trip, I can find something salvageable within them to connect with. I also think too, if you got to be a little bit of a social chameleon, right? You can't have a domineering personality that's going to rub people the wrong way.
Yep.
And when you are looking at these Part 91 dynamics amongst crew, they look at that just as much as all the other credentials of skills.
Yeah.
How well do you enmesh with our crew? That's because one bad apple really ruins it for everybody.
It's interesting. There was a client. It wasn't my client. It was another person's client at the company, and they had their defined cabin attendant, flight attendant, that they would take on all the other airplanes. And she used to battle with pilots all the time, knowing that she had this job for this executive and she was all set. Now, the executive got fired. And so the executive wasn't flying anymore. Now she needed to get another job, and she'd battled with all these people. No one wanted to give her another job because
It's your reputation.
she'd been really hard to work with.
Yes.
And she was probably doing the right thing for the client, the passenger. But in the end, like, she was kind of beating everybody up, and the dispatchers and everybody else, that no one really wanted to work with her anymore.
I think you want to be remembered for having a collaborative spirit, right? Because that's the kind of person people enjoy working with, and someone too that thinks about the crew as well. It's an early morning flight. Get the guy's coffee up there. And even if you have the director of maintenance meeting the plane early in the morning, think about him for breakfast as well. Like, be someone who people genuinely love to work with, and you will see the opportunities in your career completely flourish.
When you're thinking about safety in the back of the airplane, what are some things that maybe passengers are not really thinking about when it comes to safety, and what a flight attendant can help with?
You know what? No one plans to have cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
No one plans to have an unexpected allergic reaction. These are things that having a someone who's at least trained in first aid, someone who can be a piece of communication so that you're not creating any distractions for the flight deck.
Have you ever had to give anyone like CPR or Heimlich or?
Not on the aircraft. No.
Exactly.
No, not on the aircraft, thankfully.
Yeah.
Is there some wood for me to knock on?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, these are probably.
But, and the other component that I think about a lot is that, with these newer aircraft models, you're seeing some really powerful galley equipment. So if you don't have a flight attendant on board, but you have a client that wants to go up there and just heat something up in the microwave, it's really easy to start a fire these days. And fires, oh yeah, in fact, there have been more galley fires through Safran's microwaves that have been put on. They're being refurbished. It was Zodiac. Safran bought the company Zodiac and those microwaves that were put on board. But I think that's a really critical piece of just knowing having the flight attendant on board that, one, is trained in fire safety, but two, isn't going to make some of those catastrophic mistakes that someone could very innocently make if unaware of. Because I think sometimes you're used to having poor galley power.
Well, it's interesting to say that from an experience standpoint, because when we're arranging flights, a lot of the questions are, how experienced is the pilot? How many hours has he flown total? Right. How many hours has he flown as a captain in this specific model? But maybe from some of the newer models, that's probably a question of, all right, has this flight attendant been on this airplane? Right. Has she been on this model? How many hours has she been on this model? When was the last time she was trained? That's really interesting. Not something that I think I've never asked. I mean, some of my more, I don't want to say difficult clients. It's probably a better way to say it.
Challenging, high expectation.
For my clients that have a higher expectation, there's definitely some more questions about the service in the back. Speaking of the service in the back, when you're thinking of meals and meals that you love to prepare, will you break us down your favorite, breakfast, lunch, dinner meals that you enjoy preparing and serving to clients?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I think there's very few clients I fly that will let me have free reign on the menu.
Yep.
And the thing is too, I think you could create a whole sociology study around passenger behavior in aircrafts, because the thing is, you're dealing with a clientele that is used to having complete control of every facet of their life. I mean, they didn't get to where they are in life by not having complete control, right? Or being very regimented with control and the way they manage their life. So when you put them in an environment that they don't have control, right? You have two pilots in the flight deck. You have variables of weather and other things. They're hyperfixated on the variables that they can control. So what that creates is a lot of guests just like to revert back to their basics of the things that feel really comfortable and homey to them. So if I do have the liberty of getting to create, what I really enjoy and what I think is just fun to make on board, I love to do a cacio e pepe scrambled egg in the morning. That's always a winner. And then, people love and again, this is like their go-tos, the things that make them feel safe and comfortable. It's always a yogurt parfait. It's just one of those tried and true things. And I can jazz it up a bit.
But I would love to just order things you don't have to cook on airplanes.
Yes. Yeah. But there's still some fun ways. Like I will do a tahini poppy seed lemon blueberry parfait. So there's ways to make it exciting and fun. For lunch, you're seeing, everyone's eating clean these days, right? So you're doing a lot of protein rich salad options. So I love to poach lobster for, that's a great protein option for salad. It's really easy and quick to do on board as well.
On board.
Yes. Wow. So I'm a professionally trained chef and I pretty much specialize in cooking on board. Which granted, some parameters don't always work, 30-minute flight where we don't have time to poach lobster for 13 people, right? So you have to be really distinguished about when you choose to deploy these fun savvy skills. And dinner, I've never gone wrong with my roasted lamb rack. Every client who's ever had it is like, one celebrity client told me, forgive me, I'm direct quoting here, so you're gonna have to bleep me out, okay? He goes, "It's fucked up how good this is." And I'll just never forget that.
And that's on board. And for people that don't know, how big is an oven on board most airplanes?
Everything on an aircraft is like a Barbie plane, but for humans, right? So everything is just ever so slightly scaled down. Yeah. So it is an extraordinarily challenging environment to cook in and work in. Yeah. Because the other thing is too, I have to be really clear with my client expectation communication management. If I'm cooking on board, well, they might not see me for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I have to really be proactive versus reactive, ensuring that I'm asking them any questions. May I get you anything before I'm going to go start preparing this. I'll probably check back in on you in about 15 minutes. May I get you anything before then? Because otherwise they're like, well, where'd she go?
My drink's empty, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I get pissed off at the little things. What's been some of the more difficult requests like you've had on board to prepare or arrange?
I think of one that just makes me laugh. I was requested to make a Greek salad with no tomatoes, no red onions, and no cucumbers.
Yeah.
And I said,
So lettuce and feta cheese?
I was like, why don't you tell me what you do like about a Greek salad, and we'll like work from there. So that's kind of funny. But it's interesting because you're working with a clientele that no doesn't exist in this world. So there's like no detail too small or like no request too big. Like you just make it happen.
Yeah. But you also can't be overwhelming with clients either, right? It's not like you can continuously ask them and dig the information out of them. You need to basically be very succinct, pull that information out as quickly and easily as possible, right?
Well, and I would say too, and a great example of that is people get in the weeds of asking too many questions. And the thing is this clientele, time is the commodity, right? We already covered that. They don't want to be there
go back and forth
answering
with you,
questions for 10 minutes. So, people will say, they'll ask for a cup of coffee, and people will say, do you like cream? Do you like sugar? Instead of asking those follow-up questions, say, how may I prepare that for you?
Yeah.
Open-ended, get in the information so it doesn't seem so repetitive. So there's different linguistic things that can just create the frictionless experience that the client doesn't even, overall they'll say, that was frictionless. They don't know what it was cumulatively that made it frictionless. And those are the little, even verbal details that matter.
Well, that's like a thing about NetJets. They make it very frictionless to book an airplane and fly on an airplane.
Right.
They set a rate. They sell you everything up front. They set a rate. You make a phone call. You draw down your hours. Charter sometimes can be cumbersome. You request a quote. You've got 5 or 10 different airplanes. You go to book an airplane, it may not get owner approval. Now you go to book the second airplane, it's no longer available because it took 2 days for the owner to get back to you. So that frictionless thing, I think, is really important for anyone dealing with ultra high net worth individuals, because that time is the main asset. I have a personal vendetta against aviation catering.
Okay, let's crack it open here.
I hate it. I think it can only screw a flight up. I think it can only negatively impact a flight, especially it's more towards aviation caterers. And I should probably have an aviation caterer on just to defend themselves. But right now, I'm going to tell them how much I hate them, because either it's late or when people ask me for a menu, I said, here's a menu from a local caterer. It's going to be 5 times more expensive than you think it should be. And quite often it's going to be underwhelming. So if you really have a restaurant you like to pick up from on the way, I would suggest doing that. And people are like, what? Like, sometimes people are taken aback because the service should be very high quality, but quite often the food from caterers is low quality, and the price is astronomical.
Insane.
Absolutely insane.
It is insane how much it costs. I will say you're paying for a lot of commodities within that business that you don't necessarily think about up front. They have to have a tremendous amount of insurance, right, to cover the liability of even the transportation and having chilled transportation for that food. Furthermore, they are constantly keeping us inventory of everything. Like, they'll look at the numbers of how much of everything is ordered and how much needs to be in stock, so that if they get a call at midnight for a crudité platter and fruit platter the next day, sure, it'll be $300, but they can make it happen because those things are in stock, and they have a lot of turnover of ingredients. It's a hard business to be in. I don't envy them because it's hard to keep the quality while still making a profit. And I think they serve their purpose in some capacities, those emergency last minute, situations. And, for certain aspects, some people do only want to use aviation caterers simply because of the liability of, they've had a poor experience of getting sick one time of a deviation of not using it. So they look for that seamless process that's been very overinsured from case to case. But I will say, you know what? I think it's going to have you have a change of heart. You're starting to see a lot of private chefs start their own aviation catering companies.
I've got a private sushi chef in LA that one of my great travel agent friends and clients sets up, and they do an incredible, like not just bento boxes, but like really awesome catering here in
Yes.
LA. So if anyone needs sushi catering in LA, I can connect you with them.
Yes.
And it's beautiful. The food's great. It's a little expensive, but it's not like insane aviation
Right.
catering expensive.
Right.
And you're doing a good job of defending the aviation caterers. So you're making me
Well,
feel a little bit better about it. And
I
like,
just recognize that it's a hard business to be in,
Mm-hmm.
and something's got to give. They certainly serve their purpose in some capacities, but I do think it's been a grievance of so many people for so long that
so they're
you
not
are.
just crooks.
I'd like to think not, but then
Yeah.
again, you think of aviation, you put the word private aviation in front of anything, it's like the word wedding.
It's like weddings.
It
$1,000
joins-
for everything.
Yeah, it just jumps 500%.
Yeah.
And the other component too is let's say they charge you $30 for a specific box of crackers. They're still sending someone out on an hourly rate to go buy that box of crackers, go get them, And so yes, it is asinine and it's astronomical and it's hard to swallow.
Yeah.
But in certain cases, it is a needed business. But I think it's really exciting to see some of these more boutique-y chefs start their own.
Isn't it difficult to find those? Like, is there a good way to really find those good underground local?
It's interesting. There's actually a corporate flight attendant. Her name's Marissa, and she is working with a chef who owns a coaching company, and they're kind of finding the right people and the right personalities and training them on aviation catering, size constraints.
Yep.
When someone asks for this is what they mean. And granted,
Tins versus microwavable.
corporate flight attendants are a hard group of people to
Yeah.
make happy. They're pretty quick to judge. And I think too, in the same capacity, we hope our clients hold grace for us. We should hold grace for the other vendors that we work with.
I won't beat them up as much then. Is there from a restaurant? We'll take like Los Angeles, New York, Miami. What are some of your favorite restaurants to order from and to bring on an airplane?
Well, I will deep dive. I want to know where the hot charity functions are happening. I'm looking at Town and Country. I'm looking at some local magazines, Beverly Hills Magazine. I'm looking at where they're having events because that's going to tell me that's a trending new hotspot coming up that maybe my clients would think is interesting.
Yeah.
So I really go into the whole social engineering aspect of it. But then you have the Ivy. Everyone always wants catering from the Ivy.
Jones on Third. Yep.
The chicken salad from Jones on Third is always a winner.
But they're not. Jones on Third in Studio City isn't open till 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And they can't deliver till 9. So if you got a morning departure.
It's uncanny the amount of contacts I have in my address of like Jones manager, chef here.
Yeah.
And I always send Christmas cards. I will send them a gift afterwards if they've opened early for me or facilitated a very
You've got places to open early for you.
and it comes with the price, but you make it happen.
What about New York? What are some of your go-to like?
Carbone.
Yeah.
Oh, Carbone. Like if you can get spicy rigatoni for the client, they are like, this is awesome.
And I bet pasta's probably a good one to take on an airplane, right? When you're thinking of like when someone wants the Carbone spicy rigatoni and their flight leaves at 5 p.m. What time are you picking up?
No later than 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No later than 3.
So you got to get 3. You got to figure out how to get it to the airplane, how to keep it fresh, and then how to.
You have courier services as well. There's a couple drivers that I utilize because I'm already on the plane at 3.
Yeah.
And also too, you're thinking of like traffic at that point too. So maybe even a little bit earlier. My go-to though, and this is my hot tip here. Okay. I'm like really sharing I'm sharing
People pay for this information.
This is what I'm sharing here, and this is worth its weight in gold. Are you ready? Okay, so I'll eat at the establishment first if I have time. Okay, if I have time.
Go for lunch.
Yeah, I'll go for lunch, go for dinner. I'll eat there. And, everyone, people forget about the chef or the cooks in the back, right? So I'll say something like, I enjoyed my meal so much. I would love to meet the chef. Is it possible that he could pop out or I can pop in? And,
I would think like the chef would be annoyed by that. Do chefs come out like loving it?
They're used to people always complaining about the food. They're very used to positive reinforcement or compliments of that manner, right? They only hear when things go bad.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to like you and I, right?
No shit.
So I always say I would love to meet the chef, or I'd love to speak to the manager. That I just had such a great experience, and I just need to tell somebody how great my experience was. I was like, do you have a card by chance? I work in private aviation, and I think my clients would just just love this, and get a card from them, send them a thank you note or a thank you text, thank you email that evening, and then really start building the relationship from there.
Yeah, that's when you need, hey, I know you don't open until 2, but
Yes.
can I come in at 1?
Totally. And that's like, your Nobus in different locations as well. Cause that's, if someone wants sushi, they most likely want it from Nobu, and they don't open early.
Yeah. They want that cod,
Yes. The miso cod, the black
Nobu.
miso
I get
cod.
it.
Yes.
Red wine. What are your thoughts on it? Should it be not like, if you look at this airplane, for anyone that's actually watching, like there's so much white in this airplane.
There is.
Seats, the head or the sides, like the rug. This would be a nightmare to have spilled red wine in this airplane. Like, how do you control that as a flight attendant?
So I think there's certainly ways to mitigate risk in that manner, right? If you are not on it when it comes to pouring, the flick of the wrist and being able to really control that outpour flow, pour it in the galley.
Yep.
I don't think red wine should be banned on board. I think it's too well, and granted,
But you can't tell someone you can't. It's tough to say, hey, you can't have red wine.
totally.
On board.
And I've had the bad experience where someone has, spilled it.
Yeah, I've got a good story for that.
The other component too is, typically you're filling that red wine glass like half full.
Yep.
Does not need to be that full, on board. Just be more frequent in your pours or your top ups.
Would you ever pour it before takeoff and then forget to take it before the airplane takes off?
I would not do red wine and allow them to keep their stemmed glasses for takeoff, because no matter how many times you remind them, just a kind reminder.
Yeah.
Please be sure to hold on to your
they got a
glassware
million
for
things
takeoff.
going on.
They do, and granted, people want to hold on to the champagne flutes, and I always ask captain's discretion, right? Because it is a projectile, right? It should be stowed, but again, you have to really be able to read the room and not. Not be so enforceful that it really rubs the clients the wrong way.
Yeah, I had a departure red wine.
Flight
attendant didn't take the glass. It was an argument between afterwards. Falcon 2000, the red wine went flying. The guy was in the right side of the airplane. Red wine, almost half full, sprayed the whole side of the airplane, and then the passenger, to get out of the way to grab the red wine, cranked the chair too fast, broke the chair.
Oh gosh, this is like adding up. I'm just
Broke
seeing
the chair.
dollar signs. And I'm sure it was suede as well.
was.
Like it was,
Couldn't-
There's
had
no
to-
way it was.
Had to replace the side panel. They got it out of the carpet, but couldn't get it out of the side panel. Luckily, they got insurance to pay for it. But it's still like their out of pocket was still, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000.
And I think that's like what charter clients maybe don't always realize is that is someone else's asset, right? And so they don't think about, what are you wearing?
Yeah.
Did you just buy those dark wash jeans? Because it can stain the leather seat there.
Yeah.
I've had, a beautiful woman get on board. She had the cutest outfit, black leather skirt. The black leather dye transferred into the seat cushion. The seat cushion had to be re-dyed.
Yikes.
So you don't always think about it, because certainly it is your home away from home for the time allotted that you've purchased, but it's also someone else's asset that they protect.
That's interesting. When we're talking about locations,
Okay.
what are some of your favorite locations that you've been to recently?
I've been to recently. I'm doing a lot of international these days. Recently, I was just in Egypt. That was really cool. Switzerland. I can find something fascinating anywhere, and I want to go to the grocery store everywhere I go. I'm like amazed at what different grocery stores look like around the world. Maybe that's the chef in me, but I think most corporate flight attendants feel that way. I want to see what are the fun ingredients. I get inspired very, very easily when traveling abroad.
Any places you're sick and tired of going to?
No,
You're not sick of going to St. Martin? Why do all wealthy people go to all the same places?
Because I will say they need to be within the same social circles. It's how they perpetuate their wealth. They're hearing about different things. They're rubbing shoulders with different people, and you want to be in the same room as people who are ideally smarter than you, right? That's what every old adage says. So they want to be in the same places, rubbing shoulders with the same people and networking and then leveraging those connections.
You're not sick of going to Teterboro?
No. There's always something new. I mean, granted,
I mean, at least you go in the city into Teterboro.
Yeah, I go into the city, but even if I genuinely find joy in this occupation. Even, and granted, I'm a mom now, right? So even staying at the Residence Inn in Secaucus of Teterboro,
Yeah.
I get to watch my show. I get to
Oh,
read a
God,
book.
yeah,
I
I
get to read a
know.
book.
I know, it sounds nice.
I find luxury
Yeah.
in even the most mundane places
Yep.
these days. I know I don't. There's nothing I'm really sick of.
Well, do you have a favorite FBO?
I think the Fountain Blue in Opelika is so beautiful.
It is a really nice, fantastic FBO.
They just nailed it. They just got it right. And the design, it feels good to be in it.
It's busy, but it never feels crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Millionaire in White Plains is also gorgeous as well.
That's interesting. Do you have a favorite hotel?
Like
Domestically, do you
I
have a
was gonna
favorite?
say, do I have a favorite hotel to stay in like for work purposes?
Yeah,
So I think
or I mean, or not.
So again, I think hotels are kind of the trendsetters when it comes to hospitality, right? So I really want to stay, and the other thing that's really cool too is that within the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years is you're starting to see these really strategic partnerships between a very hot chef and a new hotel.
Yep.
So you can really start to derive some cool things like, I just recently stayed at the Plaza and I noticed, outside of all of certainly the tangible luxuries, just the way the staff was trained to, what's the best way to describe this? I ordered a bottle of champagne at the champagne bar downstairs in the lobby. And the way the bartender introduced me to the food and beverage director, she just ordered the Ruinart Blanc de Blanc. Doesn't she have great taste? So I really enjoy just picking up on the little nuances of how hotels and where you're staying can make you feel so welcome, and what are the trends?
Yeah, that's one of the things I enjoy about Las Vegas.
Oh, I love Vegas.
Is like because the whole city is dedicated to customer service.
Oh, it's so great.
You can ask questions and they'll get you what you need.
It's the concierge. It's the concierge epicenter of the world.
Yeah, they do. That's what a lot of the things I hate about Vegas is the smoking and everything else like that. But that's the one thing, like the service, ecosystem and what they're focused on, I think is fantastic about Vegas.
Totally. I love the Wynn properties.
Yeah.
To me, because the thing is you almost get ruined working in luxury hospitality. I'm constantly noticing little dust. When things just aren't right. I always loved Walt Disney's quote, people can feel perfection, right? And that just comes down to the cumulative details. And I remember having a discussion with the head butler at the Wynn, and you're looking at some of these suites, and they're humongous, right? Like thinking about the light, each light being able to turn on and facilitating, normal jobs that like estate managers would have if this were someone's private home. And I asked him, I was like, how do you manage the perfection detail of every little nook and corner of this big, large suite? And he goes, it's very simple, Jamie. You start from right to left, top to bottom. And I was like, what a simple, that's the simplification way of it, right?
Just make everything perfect all the time.
Yes.
From going back to airplanes, what are some of your favorite airplanes, I would say, in the last, 2 years or so have been like to work on?
Oh my gosh. I'm friends with so many of the OEMs.
I know.
I'm going to really ruffle some feathers.
You don't have to say it if you don't want to.
I can find, granted, remember my vantage point is as a chef, right? So I'm looking at galley countertop
Okay,
space.
then you can just talk about in galley. We won't have to say performance.
Yeah, I'm looking at the galley countertop space because that's really what affects my role of how I'm facilitating.
But also, like when you step off an airplane after a long flight, which airplanes are you feeling really good after stepping off airplanes?
The heavies, of course. There's some pretty badass birds in the sky these days.
So you can tell me if you're a global gal or a Gulfstream gal.
I love them both for different reasons.
Yeah.
I think it was really fascinating the way Gulfstream, this is really interesting, and I really admired what Gulfstream did here. When it came time to design their G700 galley, the designers just sat and watched the flight attendants work for like the whole mock flight, right? And they noticed, what are the ways we could create ease and efficiency, eliminate excessive time and motion?
Yep.
And that's something I'm consistently thinking of. How do we eliminate time and motion? Because that creates frictionless experiences for
From
the guests.
oven to drawer to refrigerator to
where even rubbish bin
knives.
was. You know, are you turning around constantly? They even created a little ledge in the galley countertop space for the flight attendant's phone to be propped up on in case they were following a recipe, that they could easily access that without having to, you know, look down at their phone, you know, that was right there. I was really impressed with that attention to detail of just studying the choreography of what a flight attendant does in the galley.
So you're like Gulfstream's better than Globals?
No, because I've had great experiences in it. And remember, too, a lot of favoritism is built in what you're comfortable on, right?
Yeah.
And I would say I probably have more experience on Globals. So therefore, that tends to be like when I step on one, I'm home a bit.
For me, the Gulfstream 550 was like the first airplane I sold a ton of charter.
Yes.
And big worldwide charters.
That was a workhorse for a while.
So it's got like
global.
the Gulfstream 550 is like, it's got the special place in my heart.
That's your special. Were you sad when they discontinued it?
Yeah, a little bit, but now I'm just waiting for like the market to get down to a spot where like I can run the numbers to make a purchase of a Gulfstream 550 be a profitable charter airplane.
Right.
Because I just think it like does everything you need an airplane to do. It was created well. It's very dependable. There's a lot of pilots. It's an airplane that I think, and it was the first coast-to-coast airplane flight I'd ever taken privately, was on a Gulfstream 550.
Oh, so that's another segment of your heart. Yes.
It's got a soft spot in my heart, and I'll always love the 550s. So
do you find that preference for that aircraft model? Are you more of a Gulfstream guy then?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll send you some swag after this.
I hope so. But even when, and I'm a little biased, so it's like even when, like if someone's like, oh, here's a Global Express, here's a G550, like a Global Express is a slightly larger, but I've got, you know, I tell people, me personally, I like the Gulfstream 550 product better, but you know, that's just me, and it'll be interesting to see, you know, the 7500 versus the G700, so it'll be interesting to see how, you know, they continue to battle, and I don't think you can go wrong when that's what you're choosing between.
No, you can't.
You know, new Gulfstreams and new Globals. It's a pretty,
you know, and it's such a cool time to be in aviation, because I think of the analogy of how, you know, Olympic runners, they don't run their best runs unless their competitor is right on their neck. That's when they're getting those world record times. And that's what you're kind of seeing between Bombardier and Gulfstream right now. They're creating world records because their competitor's right on their neck.
I know. Yeah, poor Falcon. I just read that they're having issues.
So we're omitting one completely, aren't we?
They're having issues with supply chain. It's delaying their 10X delivery, which is too bad. I ran a bunch of Falcon 2000s on a coast-to-coast program, and people love the Falcon 2000s. The decibel level in the Falcons are slightly lower than most other airplanes.
Interesting. Okay.
So they've done a good job of, it's just like a quieter cabin, and a lot of people really enjoy it. Let's talk about the travel experience.
Okay.
What are some essentials that you think people should bring when they're traveling privately? What are some things that you think they should bring on an airplane or should use for traveling?
So something I see often, and are we talking from a charter perspective?
Yeah, I would say charter clients.
Charter clients, okay.
But if you've got some great stuff that you think for other flight attendants should bring on board, please.
So one thing I think is bring a pair of slippers, or ask for the flight attendant to provide those. You know, you want this to be a home away from home. You want to put your feet up, but certainly our outdoor shoes are not necessarily clean.
Take your shoes off when you get on board.
Take your shoes
Put some
off
slippers
and
on.
Bring some slippers, because then you can, you know, and again, we talk about that asset management, asset protection component, right? If you put your shoes on the seat in front of you on these club seats, you know, when you get that dirty or you stain it, you know, it's going to be a much more expensive flight potentially for you. Yeah. So I would say people don't necessarily think about, you know, if you do have a pair of slippers. You know, I've certainly worked for clients where I loved having their slippers ready for them, you know, right at their seats.
That's awesome.
Or even if I've seen, you know, one of my favorite things is I was flying a businesswoman, and she had like sky high heels on. She looked amazing, but I was like, her feet are going to be so sore at the end of the day. So I did a quick Nordstrom curbside pickup, guessed on her size shoe based off height and whatnot, and I just had them by her seat in the back. And she's like, you have no idea.
That's awesome.
Because, just having that reprieve after having your, feet and heels for a long time. So I think that's one thing people don't think about is, if you really want to get cozy or at least some cozy socks, that is one amenity that I think charter aircrafts should always have, a nice little barefoot dream sock.
Mm-hmm. And slippers, interesting.
A little slipper.
That's really interesting. What about jet lag? Do you have any tips of how to fight and manage jet lag?
I do, because jet lag is often disguised as dehydration. So I would say, and I'm not saying this is fact, is that for every 4 hours of flying, your body's losing approximately like 1 liter of water.
Wow.
So you have no idea how much you need to consume. So, it's a lot of these little Fiji bottles.
Yep.
So even not being afraid to ask for liter bottles so that you can track your water consumption a little bit easier, that's going to mitigate the symptoms of jet lag in such a tremendous way.
We talked about communicating with, flight attendants or pilots communicating with passengers from a client or either say an admin or an actual passenger. What do you think is the best way for them to communicate with the cabin crew to make that flight the way they want it?
The best way to communicate. So you're looking like method for communication or
I would just say
expectation.
I would say expectation, or if they have certain needs, how far in advance do you want? How much detail do you want? What's the best way that you would take information from clients to make that travel experience the best it could possibly be?
I think that really great corporate flight attendants read between the lines. So if you can hear even about some positive experiences they've had in the past and not so positive experience, you're able to render a tremendous amount of data preference, right? That then you're able to compute into your own, like, okay, so they liked this, they didn't like this. What was in between the lines there that I can also render out as a specific detail of how to choreograph their flight? So I think that's always really helpful. And sometimes that information comes from the broker as well, which is so tremendously helpful.
How often are you getting riders for passengers?
Not nearly enough.
Really?
I keep my own rider directory and I'm very detailed. I probably have one of the most intense directory. I mean, I even want to know right or left-handed. I keep a track of recent life changes. Did they recently buy a new house? Does their niece recently have cancer? Okay, the next time I fly them, I can say, how's your niece doing, right? Those things are hard to remember in the minutia of everything that we do. So we have to be so regimented in everything that we're keeping track. And I take care of updating those riders immediately after the flight, because otherwise memory's a tricky thing.
Yeah, it's gone.
You got it. Or I'll take notes during the flight on my phone. I was like, okay, they enjoyed that. The other key with that too is being able to distinguish, an offhanded request versus a preference. If someone's kind of like, I'll have a ginger ale.
Yeah.
That's not a preference. That's an offhanded request. So you wouldn't put must have ginger ale by their seat every flight.
Every time they're flying, why the fuck do I have all these ginger ales all the time?
Right. So really being able to distinguish, what's just an offhanded once request versus an actual preference.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes you think private travelers make that make their experience not as good as it should be?
Probably not realizing that you can't bring as much as one would think. And I think that's where the trusted advisor piece is so critical, because you think, certainly I have the whole plane, right? Yeah. Well, actually there's
legally no. Yeah. You're legally not allowed to put baggage in, most areas in the cabin.
Right.
Or the bathroom.
Right. So really being aware of, what are the luggage restrictions of how much you can bring. I have seen that get really tricky for people where you're having to ship it, FedEx it. And
fun.
It creates quite the conundrum.
Well, Gulfstream 4s have 169 cubic feet of luggage capacity.
All right. Drop that knowledge. Let's go.
A Chevy Suburban has, I think it's 44 cubic feet with all 3 rows up. When you put down the second row, it gets to 75 feet. When you put down all 3 rows, I think it's 177 feet.
Okay.
So the way I correlate, and I think those numbers are correct. I could be wrong. So when you correlate luggage capacity, I usually say I correlate it to what people know, which is a Chevy Suburban or an SUV, right?
Right.
That's usually how I can correlate, hey, here's how much luggage you should bring. If it's more than an SUV with the second row down, then...
And that's a really important component of the trusted advisor, is not only being able to know the facts, but also how to compute it in a way that they understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, luggage is another thing that is one of those small things. when you've done enough flights on Hawker 800s.
Oh yes, yeah,
When,
that's a
like,
challenging
that's
one,
like
huh?
those baggage capacity and like golf clubs and things like that tend to be soft-sided bags versus hard-sided bags. I've had plenty of issues with bags. A surfboard. I've had a couple surfboard issues.
Golf
Skis,
clubs,
yeah.
especially when you're doing those activities. It's a
And
hobbies.
now it's the what's the like electric surfboard, the
hydrofoils.
hydrofoils.
Yeah.
But those with the batteries, not a lot of people will take those hydrofoil batteries on airplanes.
No, and again, these are things that they're uncomfortable questions to ask.
Yeah, hey,
right?
what are you bringing?
What's in this bag?
Yeah.
And that always kind of creates that tricky conundrum. So the more communication that can be on the front end,
Yeah.
again, if that client expectation communication management, that really is facilitated so much more smoother
Yeah.
when it's on your side versus
Yeah.
the flight deck being like,
Yeah,
maybe
they
you
show
can't
up
quite
with the
bring
attitude.
that.
Yeah, well, it's like it starts with, "What are you traveling for?" Yeah, oh, it's a business meeting, or it's a special event, or oh, that's great. Are you gonna have a lot of luggage, or how many people? And
See, those are those open-ended questions
Yeah.
that we kind of talked about earlier of not being too
Yeah.
detailed, but open-ended enough to draw the information out of what you need.
do you have favorite luggage that you love, like either a manufacturer or?
I do. This is another if you know tip. Now, granted, you have the Rimowas, you have the Toomies, the Paravel, you have all of those. I think people sleep on Briggs and Riley.
Really?
It has a lifetime warranty. So what I mean by that is you can beat that luggage to hell and back and they will replace it, no questions asked.
Wow, really?
It's like you buy luggage once and it's your luggage for a lifetime. And it's a little pricey, certainly, but
So
I've
is
had my
Toomey
piece.
and all. Yeah,
Most certainly.
it's you always see like the Louis Vuitton luggage everywhere. you go, right?
Yeah, yes.
So it's Briggs and Riley.
Briggs and Riley,
Is that what you're using?
yes.
You
Well,
beat the hell out of it. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's getting heaved into the cargo. It's getting heaved out.
Yep.
It's getting lugged into the back of
Yeah.
my rental car
Yeah.
or the crew car. So
We'll have to get a good like link.
yeah.
Hopefully you can like link it to your Amazon store or something.
Just whatever people find that
we're
works for
gonna,
them.
we're gonna tag him, and hopefully they'll be a sponsor.
Yes.
Maybe they'll be a sponsor.
Yes.
What are some of the new pieces of technology that you're really interested or excited about in some of maybe the newer models of airplanes you think are interesting and great for passengers?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think, every piece of technology is trying to be more predictive, right? And I'm going to kind of give you the wrong answer here.
Okay.
I think the more tech-focused, tech-heavy that we get, the more important the human touch becomes. Because, everyone's using, AI, predictive models, and granted, like predictive technology has been around a long time. And, granted, now we have, ChatGPT or whatever. But I think it creates that much more of a luxurious experience that there's a human touch involved as well. That being said, I really think, and this is something I recently discovered that I'm shocked I'm just discovering, business called Video Valet.
Oh, I know the guys at Video Valet. Yeah.
Dude, what they're doing is cool.
Like it's basically like every single movie all on your iPad, right?
Let me tell you the cool part. That's cool. That's cool. I thought that was cool too. So if you want to be watching a certain soccer match live internationally, you're flying internationally, that was impossible beforehand.
Yeah.
They have found a way, and granted, I'm not Eric, and he has an amazing team of technology experts.
He's
that
invested a
facilitate
ton
this.
into it.
I mean, it's an impressive.
Yeah.
It's impressive what they've accomplished, but being able to watch live sports no matter where you are, so that it's still crisp and computing in live real time. I think that's really, really cool.
And that's like with the new Wi-Fi systems.
Totally. I mean, you have Starlink
a
now.
lot more capable now, and that with the new systems than it probably was.
Look, now you got me started. Now I'm like, well, Starlink's really cool technology. I mean, and granted too, in anything in aviation, you always hear, there's always going to be a couple of people that just like snuff anything that's new.
Sure.
People get uncomfortable with new stuff rather than
Listen,
embracing it.
there's someone that still loves their Gulfstream 3 that like won't get rid of it.
Thank God for them. That's
I know.
good for them.
Should have got rid of it 10 years ago, but they love it, and
Good for them, not for
Yeah,
you. That kind of thing.
or the environment probably.
So, oh gosh, now I'm like so laughing at that. I kind of forgot my train of thought here, but, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. This is like the
You were
first
just
time.
talking about it's kind of like that old technology. Some people just don't like the new stuff, right?
Yes, and So here's the thing. You normally have a couple people that are like naysayers about anything new. I haven't heard a single negative thing about Starlink.
Really?
Everyone has positive things to say about it and getting it installed into their aircrafts. So I think that's really awesome too, because talk about food being a make or break of the experience.
Yeah, Wi-Fi.
I mean, again, we talk about time being the commodity.
Yeah, if their Wi-Fi system's down, that
is a derailment of a flight. And I've had flights where I have a perfect menu. Everything was executed perfect. The choreography, everything was great. The Wi-Fi stopped working, and it was totally out of my control. And
that's like flights with me when the catering's bad. I've had everything's going perfect.
Yes.
Cars there, they're waiting. Cars pulled up.
Yeah.
And the catering sucked, and they're pissed, and they don't want to pay the $2,000 for the catering.
Totally.
Jamie, if clients want to get in touch with you, but more, what kind of clients are you working with right now in your current role?
My current role, I work with clients in different capacity, right? So I still, although I own a business called Flightess, where I do train corporate flight attendants and then staff and place them, I still fly myself. So I think it's really important, if you're going to talk the talk, to walk the walk. So in different manners, I still fly myself. So I have clients that I still fly. And I love it. I never want to stop flying. That is the one thing that really gives joy and vitality. The other components that I work with in the capacity of clients are, in terms of when they are looking for that perfect match of a flight attendant. And I have a mentor myself, and she does executive assistant staffing at a very, very, very high level. Like anyone who comes to mind, she's probably staffed their executive assistants.
Yep.
And something that she shared with me that I'll never forget. And she said, when it comes to, finding the perfect match for a client in this manner, it's kind of like falling in love. You can have a list of qualities that you want, I want them to have this and look like this and be like this. But at the end of the day, there's no predictive technology or predictive measures for just chemistry when it just works and it's just right. So, you have to have the ability to read between the lines of like, what is this client's personality like? And then kind of be a matchmaker in that manner to match them with someone who's going to understand them, anticipate their needs, and act upon their unexpressed wishes in that manner. So it's playing that game of matchmaker. It's qualities that you can't necessarily verbalize, or quantify.
Can you talk about your kind of corporate training you do for Part 91 or other?
Most certainly.
Flight services?
I'll have a lot of different things going on. Sometimes it takes someone else to remind me that there's a lot to this. Yeah. So yes, because I have a little bit of a unique background, right? I went to culinary school, and not just culinary school. I went to a super yacht chef culinary school. So it wasn't necessarily restaurant management.
It wasn't cordon bleu.
No, not quite, which is a phenomenal culinary school. But this was very much, understanding how to cook with limited resources, and for a very direct clientele too, for that matter. So then I also have, British Butler Institute training as well. And then I'm trained in the Forbes 5-star hospitality standards and protocol. So with that, combined, unique skill set, I'm then able to create bespoke training programs for different flight departments and I've worked with people all over the world. And speaking of kind of trends or things that are really cool now, is people are starting to take their branding of their companies or them as an individual or, whatever speaks to them and really bring it inwards into the aircraft. So the last plane that I outfitted for clients that I was flying before, taking time off to have my son, it was really fun to build their brand out in the interior of the aircraft and really create that experience for them. That's something that I think I'm really excited about these days, is clients who do see this as a corporate asset and want to treat it as such, really bring those elements to life.
Well, if you've ever been to the Gulfstream in Beverly Hills, their like design section,
it's incredible.
It's the amount of customization, it can be overwhelming, I bet, because it's an incredible amount. So having someone that probably has that, not only, design sense, but also expertise of what it would be in an airplane, I think would be a big value. How can people get in contact with you if they want to?
So I am available on my website, www.flightess.com, and my email is jamie@flightess.com.
Awesome. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on.
Such a pleasure.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much for having me. What a fun
You got it.
conversation. Thank you.
I think it turned out really good. So thanks so much. Hey, this is Dan Harris, and thank you for watching the Ironbird Podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did too. If you want to learn more information, you can always email Jamie. It's jamie@flightess.com. I'll add her link to the show notes here. And if you want to email us, it's fly@flyironbird.com. Thanks so much.